Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And at the top of the episode, we're going to go straight into music news. Music news, music news.
Well, this one isn't music related. It's just news related. But it's news that we've talked about on this podcast, so I guess it makes it music, Tim.
Okay.
Kind of. It's Elon Musk and Twitter. Have you been following this debauchery?
Oh, crikey. I mean, I like Twitter. Traditionally, I like Twitter. I like the fact you could block keywords and block people. So you could have a very nice feed there that didn't really have stuff in you didn't want to see. I also found that rock solid podcast music community. And there's been a load of other people I've met on there. Very cool, very interesting people. People I now even consider friends I've never met in real life. And he has taken that platform and then single-handedly destroyed it.
So have you seen the news from today with it's becoming X? It's no longer Twitter, it's X. He's like made it into his own company. It's like Twitter doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I saw that. So it's the same thing as Google. Google as a holding company doesn't exist. It's Alphabet. And then Facebook is Meta. And I think it's to do with tax fiddles and stock holdings and that kind of stuff.
From what I was reading, and that could be what the behind the scenes looks like, you know, because I mean, Meta doesn't even just own Facebook. They own like Oculus and all that kind of stuff too. Sure. But they were saying that he had a dream of making a platform that's everything all in once and all in one. I don't know what everything includes. Your guess is as good as mine. Like something called like WeChat. It's his example of what he's hoping to turn Twitter into. And so now they have become part of X Holdings Corp. Apparently it has been in the works for a while now, but this is the first time we're hearing about it. Of course, he tweeted about it today. You know, it made news. But I guess WeChat is a Chinese app used for messaging, calling, payment, and other functions, and is extremely popular in China. Given China has a very limited what they can access on the internet, right? So, I mean, so that would probably, it's hard to tell why it's so popular there. Might be their only option, but that's his goal, and that's what he wants to make Twitter into.
Yeah, so WeChat works on smartphones, basic flip phones, the whole thing. And it's your payments, it's your chat, it's everything you want to do really is all in that WeChat. And like you say, the Chinese government curate it, so you only get stuff that the Chinese government wants you to have. Even if you do like a money transfer, it's done on WeChat, from what I understand. Now, Elon Musk has got this aspiration that he's going to copy that idea in the United States. But the problem is that the mobile payment market is already crowded. You've got Venmo, you've got Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, and all that kind of stuff. There's 101 messaging platforms. There's already Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. To come out with something new that has it all in one, doesn't really have a unique selling point because all that stuff already exists.
Well, and in some capacity, Google already has that on my phone. I've got Google Pay. I've got Google Messaging. You know what I mean? Google even had its own social media for a while. Not that it caught on by any stretch, but you know what I'm saying? And then on the other thing is Elon Musk is not everybody's favorite person right now. And so I don't know that everyone's going to jump board with whatever he does like he thinks they will.
No, see, the problem is Elon Musk. Everyone knew he was a loon. But in the realm of ridiculous companies and ridiculous ideas, you need them. You need people who think way out of the box, come up with wacky ideas that will never work, and do ridiculous things. And you need that for people who make spaceship companies, who make electric car companies without having Detroit involved. And, you know, most people are not flying in SpaceX spaceships. Most people, and then the average person on the street typically is not buying a Tesla because they're very expensive.
I want one so bad.
Yeah, absolutely. It creates a halo effect for them. But the problem is now Elon Musk has bought Twitter. A lot of regular people are on Twitter, and he's spouting off all these wacky opinions, and he's effectively ruining the platform. So whereas a lot of people are like, oh, Elon Musk is just this billionaire crazy guy, they're now like, why do I want to get involved with anything that he's done? He's terrible. He's a terrible person. And then the whole kind of halo of Elon Musk has gone.
Yes, it's broken. We broke his crown. And the thing about it is these people who control these companies were not, I said my boss. My boss isn't that crazy, but he does come up with ideas that blow my mind because I'd never think of it. You have to think outside of the box when you're running companies that are large scale, and I work for a national company. Yeah. So, but what I was saying is with him, it's like, and it's hard because I've heard about this about the uber rich and the uber elites. Obviously, me and Tim, we would know so much about them. Like, we totally know about that lifestyle. We live it every day. Just kidding. But with that being said, they have a lot of people who brush their egos a lot. And so when they deal with us common folk, I don't think we brush their ego quite as much as what they're seeing internally.
Absolutely. I think you're right. Yeah. And as I said, everything he's done to the Twitter platform, everything he's changed has been for the worse. Nothing on it has made it better.
It's like someone I'm not going to mention in the preview. We're just going to leave it at this. It's like a politician that everything they touch just breaks, Tim.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you could accept the fact that the Twitter company was bloated with people and it maybe needed a headcount reduction. And that's terrible for the people that work there. But, you know, it's business is business. And unfortunately. So, yeah, there maybe should have been a headcount reduction, but it should have been done properly and, you know, working through the various merits of the employees. But just to arbitrarily fire 65% of your employees, it's terrible.
Well, and like I said, the common folk who are working day-to-day jobs where any of us could be on the chopping block for, you know, a reduction, even if we're great employees, we don't want to hear that. We don't even want to think about that. And we've had a local restaurant near me, Tim, well, two of them that closed down near us, and they let everyone go, and they didn't even tell the people. And people who were normally supporters and carers about this particular person and their restaurants and their business dealings were like, that's absolutely terrible. And, you know, it leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth.
Exactly. So, I mean, I'm assuming and predicting that Twitter will just evaporate at some point because people are flocking away from it, and it'll be a shame. It really will be a shame because I said there's a lot of really cool people on there I chat to all the time. But I don't know. Maybe everyone will just migrate to the next thing.
Well, a bunch of people, because, you know, they're trying to shut down TikTok as well. I saw a thing that said if Twitter and TikTok get shut down, we're all going back to MySpace.
There you go. Well, I don't do TikTok. I have no interest in that. I feel I'm 25 years too old for TikTok.
Well, either way, if Twitter and if TikTok both get shut down, we're all going back to MySpace. Tim, you're coming for the ride. Whatever Tom's name was.
I'll be on Friends Reunited is where I will be.
Tim will just start his own blog and forget about it. I'm done.
Well, I did that. I had my own blog, Caesar's Rants. Back in the day, I invented social media even before it was a thing. Caesarsrants.org or Caesarsrants.com, I think, at the end. I had a, you know, scrolling message board type thing that you could put comments on and all that stuff. I was there before any of that got invented. Just saying.
I'm just going to say, I keep cutting poor Tim off today. I'm on one, guys. It's not on purpose. I don't do it on purpose. I'm just excited for the conversation. But you and Charlie are very similar because he read his own back in the day as well. Charlie, me and my husband. You guys are pioneers of the social media. All right. What else do you have for us that's actual music news?
Okay. Well, I have one music news item, and this is the Kramer guitar that Eddie Van Halen played in the Hot for Teacher video is going up for auction. So Wolfgang Van Halen owns all of Eddie's instruments, but this particular guitar was given away by Eddie. I think it was in 1990. He gave it to the Van Halen Guitar Tech as a retirement gift. And then he gave it to his nephew, and then his nephew sold it to a music shop. And then the music shop sold it to the current owner, and the current owner now has it up for auction. Now, this is an iconic instrument from the MTV era. The Hot for Teacher videos we've spoken of many times before. It just encapsulates everything about the era. MTV, Van Halen, The Excess, etc.
The larger than life.
Yeah, everything about it is perfect. So the Kramer guitar with the stripe pattern on that he plays in the video is going up for sale. Mm-hmm. The guitar is going up. The straight jacket that he wears in the closing scene of the video is also going up for sale. And also the gloves that he wears when he's doing the synchronized dancing set. All of those pieces are going up for sale.
So I don't know that you've played enough gigs to have enough extra money to buy them, Tim.
Well, no, because the opening bid on this instrument is being sold by Sotheby's. Yeah. The opening bid on this instrument is $1.8 million. And it's supposedly going to go between $2 and $3 million.
I mean, it makes sense, though, because you're right. And that was the age of excess. It was the age of hair bands and cars and fast music. Joy. I meant to say fast cars and loud music. Fast music. I guess loud cars, whatever. But anyway, so it makes sense. And that's cool, though. I mean, it's kind of weird, though, that he just like handed it off to his nephew.
That's weird. I mean, you know, if Eddie Van Halen gives you an iconic instrument like that, I would either keep it or I would be auctioning it at Sotheby's. I don't think I would be just like handing it off to a nephew. I mean, it's a very odd thing. I mean, this particular guitar, serial number CO176, for you people who are interested. As I said, it's a Kramer guitar made in their custom shop by Paul Unkart.
I wonder if it'll be bought by somebody who just wants to stick it in a museum or if someone will actually want to play it.
It's either some kind of business person will buy it, a museum will buy it. It will probably never, ever see a stage again, which is really sad.
That's weird to me because I kind of I understand wanting to, you know, put the relics up and like have everybody see them. But in some way with musical instruments, I struggle with that one because I feel like they're supposed to be played. They're supposed to be making music. That's what they're there for.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I mean, the thing is about this guitar is that you could probably buy all the parts for this for about $1,500. Really, you buy a couple of 80s Kramers and spray them and put a Seymour Duncan humbucker pickup in it, and basically there you go. It's the same instrument, but of course, it's not the one that Eddie played in the Hot for Teacher video.
Yeah. I mean that makes sense. It's just one of those things, and I understand though wanting to, I guess, preserve the relic for what it is. It's just music, instruments and certain things like that. I always get a little sad when I hear they're not going to make their sounds anymore.
Yeah, that's one thing I like about Joe Bonamassa. He buys incredibly expensive collector's item instruments, Gibson Les Pauls, Fenders, stuff like that. But he tours them. I mean, one of his main guitars is a 1959 Les Paul, and that's a $250,000 guitar. And he's got several of them, and he just, they're there to be played, and he goes out and tours them and enjoys them. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do with them.
With my luck, Tim, if I ever become rich, knock on wood, hopefully that happens one day. But if I do become rich, probably unlikely at this point, I'm not going to do that because with my luck, I would end up tripping and falling and breaking all the expensive things I own. So.
Oh, crikey.
Maybe I would put them in museums too.
Well, like I said, we need to wrap you in bubble wrap sometimes.
But anyway, yeah. Well, that's kind of interesting. How long do you think the auction's going to last? Do they say?
I don't know when it's going. It's going up. It doesn't say in the article that I'm reading, but it's coming up very soon. Oh, it says bidding for the instrument closes on Tuesday, April the 18th. So by the time you get this episode, this instrument will have sold, and you will know exactly how much it went for. I'd imagine it will probably top out at what they think it's going to go.
You can pause and give us a goog right there.
There you go.
I know what your answers are. All right. So I guess on to the topic.
Well, I have one tiny little piece of music news. This is very personal music news. So yesterday, which is April the 10th, because we're recording these in the past and you will get them in the future, I sold my green PRS CE24 guitar.
And that's been become an iconic staple behind Tim on that couch a few times.
Exactly.
I've seen him.
I bought that guitar because I'd always wanted a green PRS, and I finally got a green PRS, and it looks amazing, and it sounded good. But I struggled to bond with it. There's some instruments you bond with and some you don't. And every time I played it, it just didn't feel right in my hands. I think it was the neck shape was not good. So I played many gigs with it. I've owned it for about a year and a half. many gigs with it, and the last 3 or 4 gigs with it, I've feeling disappointed. And in fact, the very last gig I played with it a few weeks ago, I played the first half of the gig with it, and then I put it down and pick up my trusty Telecaster, which I love very much. And I said to myself there and then, I said, I think it's going to go. And it's a very expensive guitar, so it's a lot of money to have tied up in something that you're never going to use. So I put a thing on Craigslist, and then a gentleman contacted me, and then we met at the back of the Christiansburg police station, who has a special place for selling stuff like that. Have you ever been to that place?
Yes, and I think it's very smart.
Yeah, so those who don't know, it's a special place at the back door of the police station. Like there's cops coming in and out of there all the time, and they have a number of cameras pointed on it. So the idea being, if you're selling any kind of high-value item on an internet sale, meet the person at the back of the police station. You know, if they don't want to meet you at the police station, you know that they're probably dodgy.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there have been a lot of people who've been ripped off and different things, especially with Craigslist. Craigslist is a little sketchy, and this was a pretty high-ticket item, Tim, so smart on you.
Exactly. So I met the guy, and we chatted, and he played it for about 15, 20 minutes, and he checked it out and wanted to ask me things and all that kind of stuff. And money changed hands, and he drove off into the sunset with the Lizard, and I drove off to the bank with my cash to pay it in. So anyway, we bid farewell to the Lizard. However, I've placed an order for a replacement. Now, I decided I was going to buy an acoustic guitar. I have one really nice Taylor acoustic guitar, but I needed another one because when I go out and play acoustic gigs, I only have one guitar. And if I break a string or anything happens to it, that's it. It's done. Whereas electric guitars, I'm very lucky that I have a collection to pull from. So I bought another Taylor acoustic guitar with the proceeds. And if I'm being honest, I bought it mostly because it was blue. It
is a very nice blue, though.
Yeah, it's the same model as the other Taylor I have. The other Taylor I have has a matte finish. Mm-hmm. This is exactly the same model, but it has a gloss finish, but it has a blue stain. And it almost looks like blue jeans, almost the top.
Yeah, it's kind of got that texture. I don't know if texture is the right word. You can't feel it, but the way jeans look. Yeah.
So I should be getting it in a few days. I will most certainly have it by the time you get this episode. So I'm very much looking forward to having another acoustic guitar in my stable, and especially one that's very iconically blue. But anyhow, I thought that's the big music news of the week. I mean, who cares about some junky old Kramer from the 80s? It's all about my blue Taylor and the Lizard, let me tell you.
It'll match your room better because you've got a lot of blue hues behind you.
There we are, see. And
not that anyone who can see the podcast knows that.
Well, I mean, there's a good chunk of people who listen to our podcast have seen my videos or been on a Zoom chat with us. So, I mean, we're very lucky. We have listeners all over the world, some of which have never seen us and some of which have never seen my YouTube videos, and some we've never met. And that's all cool. And we celebrate people who listen to our podcast, and we thank you. But for the people who have, you know exactly what this room looks like.
It's an iconic room. All right. Now let me trust again to the topic.
Yeah, and Joy, it is your turn to pick the topic.
So today is National 8-Track Day.
Hey!
So it's, those weird little holidays that no one knows exist. I may have went on the Google machine and found out that it was National 8-Track Day, and I was like, ha, I know what I'm going to talk about. So
you this is the 8-track episode.
It is the 8-track episode. The 8-track tape deck. Is it a tape deck, I guess? Yeah. Day episode. It's a long title. I wouldn't name it that. But anyway, so with that being said, what I did was I want to give you guys a little bit of history of the 8-track for those who are not familiar. And then I found the 7 most valuable 8-track tapes that you can find at a thrift store, Tim. So now you could become the millionaire, billionaire, and buy that other guitar we were just talking about. So here we are. All right. So popular from the mid 1960s into the early 1980s, 8-track tapes. Also, called a tape deck, formerly known as stereo 8s. I never actually heard anyone call them stereo 8s. That was news to me.
Okay.
Are celebrated today, the National 8-Track Day. In the early 1960s, a number of magnetic continuous loop audio tapes were existed, such as the 4-track tape, which predated the 8-track tape. I didn't know that either, so I'm learning a lot. The technology of the 8-track tape was created by Bill Lear of Learjet Corporation, along with Amplex's magnetic. I can't say that word. Magnetic. I couldn't get magnetic out. It's the most easy word that I just read it. It wouldn't come out of my mouth. Tape. Company General Motors, Ford Motor Company, RCA Records, and Motorola. Richard Krause designed the 8-track tape under Bill Lear in 1963. Did you own any 8-tracks, Tim?
No. So you'll probably come onto this, and I may be preempting the stuff that you were about to tell us, but
yeah,
8-track in the UK was not really a thing.
Yes.
And I don't know whether you want to speak to all that before I give my comments about the world of the 8-track.
So the reason that I would say it was probably not a thing is 8-tracks were built based off of the car. So did you hear my little thing about General Motors, Ford? Those are all American-based car companies. So they were introduced in Fords in 1965, and then later there was the 1966 Thunderbird, a Mustang, and Lincoln. All 4 vehicles had 8-track tapes. Then Chrysler and GM offered 8-track players in their vehicles as well as the RCA Victor put 178 album releases on our 8-track. So I would imagine the reason that they probably weren't popular is I don't feel like those cars would have been popular in the UK.
No, and I think some of those brands were sold in the UK, Ford, etc. But yeah. I think the deal that the Bill Lear had of Learjet fame is that he cut that deal with those auto manufacturers. And that same deal was not cut in the UK, even though many of those brands were sold in the UK. So 8-tracks, I believe, were available, but it was not really a thing. Now, I grew up living above a TV shop with my dad in the audio video industry. So I've been in and around that stuff my whole life. And I've seen a lot of esoteric stuff like laser discs and Philips video packs and every variation of a technology that's come and gone, DCC, mini disc, you name it. I've seen all that. But the only sort of recording medium or tape-based playback mediums I ever came across was reel-to-reel or the compact cassette, which you would just call a cassette. I've since seen people in the UK who've had 8-track tapes, but it was really not a thing. And I think it's because that deal that the Lear company did with the auto manufacturers in the US made it super popular. The other thing as well in the US, of course, you have this big car culture. Yep. You know, people love their cars in the UK, and I always have done, and people collect cars and stuff like that. But it's just the nature of the necessity of it in the US that you have to have a car and the whole surrounding car culture that goes with it. So people spend a lot more time commuting. People spend a lot more time in their cars. So you're going to buy your GM car in the 70s. It's going to have the 8-track tape player in it. And then you're going to go buy your 8-track tapes. And, of course, then that technology gets ingrained in the culture.
And it makes sense. And like Mustang is kind of an American iconic car that's why I assumed when you said that, I was like, it's probably related to the cars, why it didn't quite make it out of the gates into the UK. Now, the albums that are the most popular, let me just go back one second. I'll say this in a second. 8-tracks were the main portable and car audio format of the era. For the 60s into the 70s, the players were available in vehicles until the early 1980s. The peak year for 8-track sales in the United States was 1978. 8-track tapes and players were gone from most department stores by 1982. So it's a very short-lived thing. But the tapes continued on. Some people still put out tapes throughout the 80s because people still had the cars until about 1988. That's when the last 8-track was made. And that was in Columbia House and RCA Records. And then they were preceded by, of course, the normal cassettes.
Absolutely. So. Now, what's different about an 8-track cassette, 8-track tape cartridge, if you will, and a normal audio cassette? It's an 8-track. It's a continuous loop of tape. So it plays it. The reason it says it's 8 tracks, it has 8 stereo tracks on it, meaning it has 4 tracks that you can listen to. Because, you know, on a regular cassette, there are 4 tracks on there: stereo left and right on side A and stereo left and right on side B. And on an 8-track cassette, there's left, right, left, right, left, right. Okay. So you have 4 programs that you can play. And you would put your 8-track player in the deck, and then you could press a button and switch between the 4 programs. The problem is the way that the tapes are made, and they said they're a continuous loop. So when it finishes, it just goes back to the beginning again. What you would have is that because you have your 4 programs and you can only get so much tape in it, some songs would continue on another track. So you'd have, I don't know, 5 minutes of Sticks or something, and then it would fade out and then go clonk, and then it would fade back in on the other track.
I see what you're saying. So it's like it would end, but then you would get both the songs playing at the same time, I would imagine.
Well, it would fade out on one track, it would clonk at you, change to the next track, and then so you would have longer songs sometimes broken up between the tracks.
I mean, to be fair, you guys all have to put in perspective, this all happened before I was born. So Tip's going to be more of an expert on this. Also, he happens to know a lot about audio visuals, and it just dawned on me. It's probably, I mean, you were destined to go into this kind of field with music and IT, considering how you grew up, Tim. It was just destined to be.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I didn't know anything about 8-tracks or how 8-track works, really. I'd seen them in thrift shops, but I hadn't really put a lot of thought into it. But there's an excellent YouTube channel called Tech Moan, run by a gentleman called Matt, and he does
Charlie watches that.
Yeah, and he does some really good technology videos, especially with like retro technology and retro audio technology. And he's done many videos on 8-tracks and the various variations of 8-track, like 4-track, like you speak of. And there's been some games and stuff that use 8-track cartridges and things like that. And through him explaining how they work and taking them apart and stuff like that, I have my 8-track knowledge. So as I said, I didn't grow up with it. It was nothing I had any exposure to as a child. But thanks to Matt at Techmoan, I know.
And we are not affiliated with him in any way. But if he wants to come on the show, he can come. It's fine. So these are what's I just kind of went on the Google machine again and found out, because there's a big resurgence. We talked about, you know, the hipsters of America buying up things like vinyl. There are some hobbyists who love collecting 8-track tapes. It's a very short window of when they were available. So, you know, it is kind of a limited supply. So it makes sense. And it's an interesting culture. I think it spoke to, like we said, it's very tied into car culture. So I feel like it probably spins into that as well. But anyway. This surprised me. This first album's probably going to be one me and Tim don't know a whole lot about, but I'll give you a little bit of background. Tim may shock you, but wouldn't be the first time. The rest of the albums are going to be a little bit more familiar. The most valuable and rarest 8-track tape is from 1969, and it is Frank Sinatra and Antonio Carlos's J-O-B-I-M, so Jim Boom, Sinatra Jim Boom, Jim Beam? I don't know how you say that. But for some reason, so basically it was recorded an album together they recorded this album together under Warner Brothers, but it was never released on vinyl. It's believed that 3,508 8-tracks were made, and most of them were destroyed. Although a handful of copies still survive, as of 2019, there are 8 tracks sold for $4,200.
Crikey. Well, I can tell you, I'm very familiar with this album.
Of course he is.
Francis Albert Sinatra and Antonio Carlos Jobim from 1967 is when the album was released. This is part of the 1001 albums you must listen to before you die.
Oh, interesting.
And I have heard this album recently. And of the various Frank Sinatra albums I've heard, I actually really liked it. It's a lot more orchestral than some of the other Frank Sinatra stuff. But I don't know. I really enjoyed it. He really was in his swing there. And the version that's on...
That seems like a pun, but okay.
Yeah, no pun intended. The version that's on Spotify has the girl from Ipanema on it. And it has like him talking in the studio about how he wants it faster and slower and this and that. And it's interesting peek into the world of Frank Sinatra. But yeah, if you'd have asked me this about this album, I don't know, last year, I'd have had no idea what you're talking about. But I have listened to this and digested it as part of my 1001 albums challenge.
So it's supposed to be in bossa nova style, so that's what you're going for there. It was produced in English and Portuguese, so I'm guessing the other guy that we tried to The other guy that I probably butchered his poor name was the piano, acoustic guitar, and backing vocals. And just to clarify the dates, it was released in 1967. I think the original, that's when they recorded and released, but I don't think it made it to 8-track until 1968 based off of, or 1969 based off what I was reading. But that's up for controversy. And I don't know why it never hit vinyl. That's kind of interesting. There have been it has been re-released now on regular cassette and re-released on CD, of course.
Absolutely. Now, so what you're saying is that when I'm in the MCEAP thrift shop and I sort of see those 8-track cassettes that no one buys, this weekend I should have a look and see if they have that particular one.
Yes, the one of the 8 in the entire world. I just thought it was random. I don't know why when I pulled up the article, I wasn't expecting Frank Sinatra to be at the top.
Yeah, it's funny, but, you know, Frank Sinatra's got a lot of fans even now, and, you know, people collect stuff like that.
I mean, yeah. Now, this next one is going to be one me and Tim are both very familiar with. Probably most of our listeners will be. But there's a caveat as to why it is so expensive. So the next one is Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Okay. So if you can find the 8-track tape of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon with a little notch in the upper right-hand corner, you're in luck. These 8-track tapes consistently sell for about $1,000 each, up to $1,500 is 2021. And it's all thanks to that notch. 8-track tapes with those notches are specifically made to be played in quadraphonic sounds?
Quadraphonic.
What Tim said. For lay people, that just means for me. I like how the article is literally like, for people who don't know what they're talking about, like Joy, just means the type of surround sound as opposed to mono stereo that most of them were programmed to play at the time.
Yeah, there was a time in the 70s where quadraphonic sound was a thing. And it was before, obviously, Dolby Surround and 5.1 and 7.1. And that stuff hadn't even been thought of. But hi-fi folks in the 70s really wanted to get into quadraphonic sound. So you have 4 discrete channels. Yeah. Front and left and right front and left and right back. And there was a way of doing it where you could have a record or a cassette or an 8-track or a reel-to-reel, and they would encode the audio in a certain way. You needed a special decoder to pull the back channels out of it. So the fact that they released a quadraphonic version, or I certainly know they've released a quadraphonic version of Dark Side of the Moon. Yeah. But the fact that they made an 8-track tape in quadraphonic is very interesting.
It is. And I'd be curious to know, I haven't seen a picture of what the little notch in the corner looks like. We might have to get that for the viewers and put it on like Instagram or something, see if we can find a picture of that little notch so they can go hunting for it. Because I imagine any 8-track you find with that little notch is going to be rare, because I know quadra means 4. I get that, but I've never seen quadraphonic wrote out like that. Because like Tim said, now we have like Dolby surround sound, 5.1, 7.1. So I'd never seen it written like that. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the notch literally is probably just a mold in the plastic. I imagine it's nothing great. Because like on audio cassette tapes that you used to get, at the end, at each end, you could break off the tabs so you could stop your recording on them. Or if you bought a pre-recorded cassette, that they were actually molded like that. Now, if you had one which was chromium, which is a slightly better quality of cassette tape, it had a further notch just a little bit in. And that was so the cassette deck would know that it's a chrome tape and apply a different kind of recording to the cassette or playback to the cassette. And then if you had one of those super expensive metal grade tapes, again, that would have a different kind of notch molded in the plastic. So the deck knew what kind of tape it was, what kind of tape formulation it was.
So that's interesting to me because I'd never really thought about it, but I guess it has to have a way to know.
Yeah, because, in modern times, recording on tape isn't really a thing, really. I mean, there's some people that are into recording into reel-to-reels, and there's enthusiasts in every market. But these days, if you had something like that, it would probably be encoded in the tape digitally, and the deck would know how to do it. But you think then everything is pure analog, and the deck really needs to know how to write on this cassette tape or read this cassette tape correctly. Mm-hmm. And the only way you can do it is by having a little plastic feeling bit at the top that will tell you, please record on me, don't record on me. It's metal, it's chrome.
There we go. I knew this episode was going to be one that Tim had some good insight into. All right. So the next one that you want to be looking for when you head to your thrift store is Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? So Marvin Gaye's, rise in Motown and then shocking murder made him one of the most famous Black artists of the 1960s. That being said, not every one of his albums on 8-track is worth something. This album is the most valuable of the catalog, just for whatever reason, but only sells well if it's factory sealed. For a factory sealed copy, it goes for about $1,300.
Okay. And what was the name of the album again?
Marvin Gaye, What's Going On?
Okay.
So it's a self-titled. It's named after the single.
And what tracks are on that album? What would I be familiar with?
Let's see here. Well, the song "What's Going On."
Well, of course.
Let me bring up the list. I got it right here. What's Happening, Brother? Mercy, Mercy Me. Ride On. Holy Water. Inner City Blues. Flying High. That's pretty much it. Oh, God is Love and Sad's Tomorrow. It's not a huge. I mean, I know the song What's Going On, What's Happening, Brother. I've heard Mercy, Mercy Me before, but it's not a super, those aren't big singles that most people know from Marvin Gaye.
Well, I mean, Mercy, Mercy Me. I mean, I'm very familiar with that being a Marvin Gaye song, but also that was recorded by Robert Palmer of Addicted to Love fame.
Yeah. I think I'm probably more familiar with Robert Palmer's version, too. Maybe that's why. I think that this one is just he's such an iconic person, and What's Going On was that big hit for him. Marvin Gaye, I mean, sadly, he was, passed away quite early, as we mentioned, but he was very popular and very predominant for a very short amount of time. So it's kind of hard to, he didn't have a massive amount of hits. He did have great music for the very short amount of time he was here, but...
Yeah, but it does, unfortunately for him, I mean, yeah, he didn't get to enjoy life for a good long time, but it does cement his legend. And then, we've spoken before of artists like Jimi Hendrix, Nirvana, people who came and went in such a short little period of time. Their legend is cemented. It really is. Whereas, you have an artist like Carlos Santana, for example. Amazing guitarist, influential. He brought something new to the to music and to guitar music and all this kind of stuff. And he's enjoyed a long life. So, he's still with us and a huge long career. And people say he's great, but you wonder whether Jimi Hendrix would be the same now. If Jimi Hendrix was still alive, would we be talking about him in the same way we speak about Carlos Santana? Yeah, he was influential. He did cool stuff, and he's a great guitar player, and his career went up and down and did all this stuff. But these legends become legends, sadly, because they die so young.
Well, and for those who don't know, I'll just go into it. If you're not familiar with what happened to Marvin Gaye, basically his parents got into a fight on April 1st, 1984, in his family's house. I've heard this story before. I looked it up while we were talking, but just so you have the fine details. In West Adams neighborhood of LA, he became involved in a physical altercation with his father, Marvin Gaye Sr., who shot Gaye twice, once in the chest, piercing his heart, and then once in his shoulder. The shooting took place in his bedroom around 12:30 p.m. The first shot proved fatal. He was pronounced dead about 1 o'clock, so it was pretty short. It was 1 day short of his 45th birthday, so that's how young he was. And actually, I didn't know this part, but interesting, his father was initially charged with first-degree murder, but his charges were reduced to voluntary manslaughter following the diagnosis of a brain tumor. He was given a suspended sentence of 6 years and probation. He died at a nursing home in 1998.
I mean, everything about that is tragic.
Yeah. And sadly, if you really look into what traumatic brain injuries and brain tumors and stuff do, they can change somebody's personality completely. It's kind of terrifying, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously not going to say any names, but I know somebody who had an accident and hit their head, and it totally changed their personality. I mean, the particular person that I'm thinking of has got back to normal to some degree, but there was a period of time when it was a big stressor on their family.
Well, and I'm pretty sure, I haven't looked, I would have to Google it, but I'm pretty sure Marvin Gaye's father was originally a minister. He had and Gaye really respected him. It was one of his big influences from what I've read. I read a whole autobiography about him. And so it's kind of interesting and sad that that's how it went. But yeah, so sadly, they found out later he was struggling with a brain tumor, and that's what kind of may have put it makes some people very angry, I guess you could say. So for those who don't know, that's why that was what happened to him. And we will move on to our next one. And this will be something that we talked about here recently. And it is Kiss' self-titled album.
And as I've said before, I've somehow gone through my entire life completely avoiding Kiss. I was aware of Kiss living in England, but it wasn't something that a lot of people were speaking about, and it wasn't really played anywhere. And I it just never entered my listening. And last year and this year, I've decided I would go through the entire Kiss catalog. Both, and by the way, that because it's Kiss, they're both with a K. Kiss catalog,
of course.
And what I've found is it's just good times 70s rock and roll for the most part. And I really like it, and I like the songs, and I'm really enjoying delving into the catalog and finding some cool stuff. I normally listen to a Kiss album on a Tuesday, because that's what you do. And I listened to one today, and was it Carnival of Souls or something? It was actually really good. Yeah. I liked it.
Was Carnival spelled with a K?
It should have been.
That's a missed opportunity, Gene Simmons. You know about your making your band profitable in marketing and merchandise.
Exactly.
All right. So basically, for those who don't know, Kiss in America is one of the most profitable rock bands. They're big in their merchandise and they're huge in pop culture. And we're talking about the 80s, grandiose 70s into 80s kind of genre with these fast cars and all this stuff. So basically, the reason that their 8-tracks are worth as much is just because there's a huge cult following of Kiss collectors who love Kiss stuff. I actually knew this guy I went to high school with, and I still know him. He works at our Target down here. Oh. I still see him. Well, he used to work at our Target. Now I think he's a school teacher, but sorry, Jason, if you're listening. I don't remember every career you've had, but he definitely is a school teacher now that I think about it at Montgomery County. But he used to work at Target. So he was obsessed with Kiss in high school. And I mean, to the point that it was almost crazy. Sorry. But he had everything he owned was branded merchandise, like his car. I remember his license plate inside its locker, his book, this. He took the Kiss, and it's shocking to me how much merchandise for Kiss is still out there. And he's on my Facebook. So he's constantly sharing stuff where he's buying more and more merchandise from them. And he definitely took it to the extreme.
Yeah, I mean, and there are a lot of collectors of Kiss stuff. Like, for example, the guitarist John Five, who is now playing with Motley Crue, he's a huge Kiss collector. Sometimes he posts pictures from his house. He's got these huge glass cabinets full of Kiss stuff. People love that stuff. And as I've said, Gene and Paul and Kiss, yes, it's a band and they make music, but the pair of them sort of say, this is a business. We're business partners. And, they created these iconic images, these iconic characters. And you can buy anything you want. Now, it wouldn't surprise me, to be honest with you, if you could still buy Kiss 8-tracks. And the reason I say that is that Dolly Parton did an 8-track release 2 Christmases ago. And there are companies now, of course, they don't make 8-tracks anymore. But there are companies, what they do is they buy up used 8-tracks, they take them apart, They clean all the plastic and regenerate the plastic so it looks like it's brand new. All the little the bit that pushes the tape against the head and all the mechanism inside, they renew all of that, and then they reassemble them, and then they put brand new labels on them, and they put them on a duplicator, and then they put albums on them, and people buy them as collectibles, which is why there was that Dolly Parton Christmas album 8-track release. Being the fact that Kiss will sell anything with Kiss on it. It really wouldn't surprise me if you couldn't buy a brand new Kiss 8-track right now.
Probably. I will say for this one specifically, they're saying if you get the self-titled album from 1974, if it is factory sealed, it sells for around $1,000, and one in 2022 sold up for $1,200.
Well, there you go. And people like the factory sealed stuff. And I mean, that's fine if you're a collector, but I don't know. If I was into 8-tracks, I'd want to play my 8-track.
I know, that's what I'm thinking. And I'm also like, how many people are keeping 8-track? In the initial, okay, I see it now from a collector standpoint, but when 8-tracks first came out, how many people were keeping them factory sealed? Was like at that point, I feel like you didn't know where where it was going. You were buying it to listen to it. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's you would maybe have one way after the fact if someone was clearing them out and you put them in the loft, or like Target or something, or FYE was basically giving them away. But you're right. Keeping stuff like that and factory sealing it is very odd, and you wonder how it ended up like that. Now, for example, when I was a kid, I used to have Kenner Star Wars figures. And one of the Kenner Star Wars figures I had was Darth Vader. And a friend of mine, Chris Chalk, is a toy collector, toy seller. He's into the toy world, and he trades toys and sells toys and collects toys. Yeah. Apparently, one of the most valuable Kenner Star Wars toys is the Darth Vader, where he has the lightsaber that comes out of his arm, and it's in two pieces. Most of them that came out in one piece. But at the very beginning of the run, you pulled the plastic lightsaber, and then you pulled another bit, and it was two pieces. And it went to market, and very quickly it got withdrawn because that second piece would break off, and it was a choking hazard. Now, I had that, and yes, the second piece did break off, but but I didn't choke on it. But I enjoyed my Darth Vader as a little kid, and I played with it, and I did all kinds of stuff with it, and it evaporated into the sands of time. Yeah. Now, of course, if I'd have kept this Darth Vader with a two-piece lightsaber and kept it on the J card that it came with and hadn't played with it and put it away, I could probably pay off my mortgage with that.
That's how I feel about my Polly Pockets that are worth as much as I had the castle. There's so do you know what Polly Pockets were, Tim? The little toys. So I had tons of Polly Pockets. I had some that I had gotten, and then some that I inherited from my older sister from the 80s, because my older sister was born in 83. And for those who don't know, Polly Pocket, it's like they're little mini dolls, kind of, and the little characters, and you had little houses and little things, and like just different little pieces that you could build, like communities and little things with them. So I had one that was this castle that was a Polly Pocket castle. And I looked at it the other day, and I could, if I still had it, I could pay off my mortgage as well, Tim. So, life, it comes at you hard. And Charlie's told me a million times about, all the Pokemon cards. If he still had them from when he was a kid, we would be billionaires. But he's still, for those who don't know, I do understand the collection thing. My husband, Tim, has been witness to this. There's probably about, 2,000, and that's not an exaggeration, Funko Pops in my house. There are shelves built into walls for Funko Pops. But the thing about it is they've oversold the market now. So Charlie's kind of over it. Now I just have Funko Pops one day that hopefully will be worth money. We'll find out.
Yeah, didn't Funko make so many Funko Pops they literally can't sell them, and they're throwing them away?
He just told me the other day the problem is they've oversaturated the market. I think it's just because they didn't, there's a few, like there's these ones that are like Freddie Franco or something like that, Freddie Funko, whatever his name is, that they're very rare. And if you get one, like Chad was telling me the other day about this guy who had 8 of them and traded 2 of them for like an Escalade or something. So there are a few that are very rare, but the vast majority, and we have a few that are rare and we have a few that are signed. And of course the signed ones are going to be worth more, right? Sure. But the vast majority of them now have become not worth what you probably paid for them initially. We have a very few. And I got him a very special one when I was in Greece that weirdly enough was from Mexico, but it was at the store in Greece. I don't know how I ended up with that. That one is worth some money because it was like only produced a few times and it's from a different country. But other than that, so hopefully, he calls it his visual savings account. So if we ever have to get a new liver or something, I'm going to be selling whatever the Funko I got him from Greece was.
Well, Charlie gave me a Selena, which I have in my office at work, which is a limited edition one. And I'm looking at here, I have James Bond as Moonraker, Lemmy, and I have 3 Brian Mays, because everybody needs 3 Brian May Funkos.
Around me, I can see a Baymax from the movie Baymax, Lilo from Lilo and Stitch, a troll one that was cool because I painted it. It was like you could paint it. I can see the rainbow troll, a giant squirrel, a giant, these are all Pokemon, Bulbasaur, a giant Pikachu, a giant SpongeBob, and then a giant Charmander, who's also a Pokemon. And there's tons more over there that are a bunch of anime characters that I don't know. And I can see an elf one. That's just in this room. The bedroom, I always joke that it's kind of creepy because he built shelves in the wall in our bedroom and he has most of them up there. And it's like they stare at me while I'm sleeping. And if they really do come to life, I also said that if an earthquake ever hits, I'm going to wake up with 1,000 Funko Pops falling on my head. It's going to stab me right in the eye. But anyway, that's how I go. Funko Pops attacking my face. All right, so moving along back to this. So I have a funny story to go with this one. So the next one is Led Zeppelin's 4. Or IV, depending on if you want to call it the Roman numeral. So Charlie's work, the initials for Charlie's work is Inorganic Ventures, IV. Mm-hmm. So there was a guy on the phone with a customer beside Charlie the other day. And the customer kept saying I think it was like an order number or account number or something, was IV 0004 or whatever.
Yeah.
And the guy kept going, our numbers don't start with IV. Our numbers don't start with IV. He's like, and then the customer goes, well, maybe it's a Roman numeral like 4. And then Charlie goes, that's the initials for the company. We work for Inorganic Ventures. The conversation went on for about 5 minutes and Charlie goes, he just kind of leans over and goes, some of our customer numbers have our initials at the beginning. It's Inorganic Ventures. And the guy was like, oh, yeah, that's probably right. But the guy on the phone kept going, maybe it's Roman numerals. Maybe it means 4. So anyway, I thought that was pretty funny. So anyway, back to Led Zeppelin. The most, infamous album for Led Zeppelin is Led Zeppelin 4, featuring, the iconic Wheat Farmer cover with hits like Black Dog, When the Levee Breaks. The album kind of stood the test of time as like their biggest album. And the 8-track, that's why it does so well. So once again, sealed. Got to be sealed, Tim. For some reason, that seems to be the key. One of their sealed stereo 8-track tapes sold for $1,000 in 2019.
But there we are. That's the other thing I was thinking about with these sealed tapes. So even if you crack them open, depending on where they were stored, they may be unplayable. Because what happens is that the oxide on the tape, because the tape is just like thin plastic with oxide caked on it, over time what happens is the oxide comes away. That's why when you hear about old film reels and old audio tapes from mixing, from recording studios have to be baked before they can use them. They're the same. If it hasn't been stored in a good place, even if you unsealed this incredibly expensive Led Zeppelin 4-track, you put it in the deck, it's just going to leave tons of oxide on the head and be effectively unplayable.
That's a good point. I wonder if they can be baked. Do you think they can be baked?
Yeah, you'd have to take them apart because it would melt the plastic.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess if you're a hardcore 8-track collector, you would probably know that. I hadn't thought about it, but I've definitely heard them say that about old film for movies and things like that.
Yeah, and when you hear like someone will go back and they'll have the original master tapes of the Beatles or something, and they want to digitize it, and they will have to bake the tapes to stop the oxide dropping off them.
Well, there we go. If someone knows, if someone is an 8-track aficionado and has dealt with this, please let us know what you do.
Well, what you would do is you would collect the 8 tracks because you like the collectible, and then you'd listen to it on YouTube or something. And
pretend like it's in your 8-track player.
Exactly.
All right. So we have 2 more albums, and this one is surprising to me. Now, it's not surprising in the sense that it's not a popular album, but for some reason, it's just not something that I think of when I think of 8 tracks. And it's not something that I would think of in this kind of genre and film or genre and era. It's U2's The Joshua Tree.
Yeah, I suppose that's getting towards the end of the 8-track era. That's 80s, isn't it? 87, 86, 87, something like that.
I think it's 86. I'd have to look. Hold on. We'll find out in a second. But yeah, it's just weird to me because, like, I don't associate them with, I don't know. It's just 87. March 9th, 1987.
There you go. I thought it was about that kind of time. So it must be getting towards the end of the 8-track era. And it was probably is that one that you're talking about, a Columbia House or a BMG pressing, as it were?
Let's see here. Columbia House.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, we used to have them in England. The one that we have was called the Britannia Music Club. And in the United States, they had one called Columbia House or BMG. And what you would do is that you would send away a penny or something, and they would send you 8 or 10 albums or something. And then from there on, then you had to promise to buy one full price album a month for a year or 2 years or however long it was. But what happened is people worked out that really you could put any old name you like on it, and they would send you stuff, and then you just throw the stuff in the bin, and they would never come after you.
Yep. It's kind of like the fruit clubs and the there's different clubs, like people did that with, like, they had like subscriptions for magazines and stuff similar that did very closely. I love when I hear people, I don't know about you, but because they never followed up with any of that, I remember hearing people say back when I was younger, I canceled that subscription and they still keep sending me
I've heard that magazines. As well. Yeah.
So anyway. Yeah, it was common. It's kind of like when I was a kid, whenever you could actually call and order stuff without having to have your parents on the phone and they just let you do it. I just didn't care. Do you guys have a lot of like by now 1999 stuff in the UK, or is that more of an American commercial type thing?
What sort of
like all the little advertisements, buy this CD now for $19.99, call this number.
Yeah, that used to be a thing. I mean, we didn't get multi-channel TV really until the early 90s. Yeah. For most people, when Sky TV came out and satellite TV came out, there's a few people that had cable before that. But yeah, when there was lots of time to fill, there was lots of those exclusive TV offer not available in the shops. And you used to get that on ITV and Channel 4 and stuff, but it was more of a multi-channel thing.
I was just curious because, like, in America, you get advertisements for prescription medicine. And I know in UK, they're not allowed to do that. Like
it's very limited what you can advertise with things like that. You can't advertise prescription medication. You can't advertise funeral parlors. I don't think you can't advertise things like doctors and surgeons and stuff. Here, it's just like, whatever, you can advertise whatever service you want to or whatever product you want to.
Does it matter? You can advertise tattooing something on people's foreheads for 2 cents and they'd probably let you do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I remember the first I heard about the prescription pills. I thought that was interesting, but I kind of get it. And for those of our UK friends who have never heard an American prescription pill commercial, they're ridiculous. It's always like some pill that's like, let me cure depression. And then there'll be like 3 people walking, holding hands, jumping up and down. Yay! And then at the end, it's like, but call your doctor. And it names every possible side effect since the beginning of time.
Oh, yeah. So side effects can include sudden death and drowning and alien abduction. And
it goes on forever.
Yeah. But then what they would do is they'll speed it up.
Mm-hmm.
No, very stops. And it's absurd.
They're always ridiculous. And it'll always be like the most unrealistic situation of like some kids skipping rocks and like grandma's trying to help them. And now she can't skip rocks because her arthritis is bothering her. But now she took the pill and now she can skip the rock. Yeah. Anyway.
I live in a world where I don't get exposed to a lot of advertising. I have ad blockers on all my browsers. I have YouTube Premium.
Yep.
All of this, like Peacock that we have now so I can watch the wrestling, is the ad-free version. And I don't watch broadcast TV, so I never see this stuff.
But you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's iconic.
100%. 100%.
For those who've never seen it, just spend a little time on YouTube. You'll find it very quickly.
Exactly.
But anyway, back to this. So basically, Joshua Tree, it says, can sell, if you find, once again, a sealed copy of their album, it runs from about $500 to $1,000. Most recently, the Joshua Tree sold for $625 in 2021. So I mean, $500 for something you find for $3 at the thrift store could be useful.
There we are. Well, again, I'll be looking out for any of these sealed 8-tracks. This will be a new thing for me.
And we're going to end it with one that will probably be one Tim's familiar with, and not a shocker at all. And we'll probably dive into something else after this. I'm going to give a little bit more information. But the last album is Iron Maiden's self-titled album.
There was an 81, 82.
Let's find out. I have it over here on the Google. Self-titled album, Iron Maiden. Yes, that's me typing, everyone. Let's see. 1980 was recorded in 1979. It came out on April 14th, which is, pretty close to the time of the month for him right now, 1980. And it has that little guy on the front that Tim told me has a name.
Eddie.
So I can see Eddie in the picture.
there we are. I mean, this was probably, again, there's certainly the beginning of the end of the 8-tracks. It was not the end of the 8-tracks, but the beginning of the end of the 8-tracks.
Well, and basically what they're saying for this one, let me click back. Iron Maiden's self-titled 1980 album. They said, 8-track sold so well. It's basically around, most of them they see are around $100. But if you find an unsealed copy, and it's unrestored, so I think they're restoring this one. That's a piece they're saying unsealed and unrestored. It sold for $577.89 in 2020.
There we go. And by restore, what they mean is that you can apply stuff to the plastic because the plastic will yellow over time. And there's you get people who buy like classic computers like a VIC-20 or a Commodore 64 or something, or an old Apple. And there's certain chemicals you can use that will take the yellowness out of the plastic and restore it. And much like that company I was telling you about that released the Dolly Parton, the Christmas 8-track release, they restore the plastic cases. And I think there's a thing is if you get these and they're in poor shape, because often you think like an 8-track cassette, where's it been? In someone's car forever. Yeah. So it's got hot, it's got cold, it's got drinks spilled on it, it's been thrown in the floor well. It's not going to get looked after. So maybe someone who collects the stuff would be thinking they could apply these same processes to restore the plastic to make it look good.
No, it makes sense. So I'm going to end it. Well, we've got a little bit more to talk about because we've got a little bit more time, but I'm going to talk about something Tim kind of hit it on earlier about 8-tracks. While looking this up, even though today is National 8-track Day and we're supposed to be celebrating them, they're literally the worst kind of thing you could put in a car. Because from what I understand, they don't hold up well to heat. So supposedly what they're saying is they're bulky, of course, but they said that you would be the summer heat as your car would heat up, the tape would get stuck. Did you know that, Tim?
Yeah, because the way that the continuous loop is done and it pulls from the center of the continuous loop, I could see that the tape would get hot and it would get stuck.
Apparently that is everybody's got the iconic, winding up the tape in like a cassette whenever it gets unwound, blowing on your CD, trying to clean it, all those things we all did. The key to it, the 8-track is having to wiggle it to rip it to get it out, because if it got too hot in your car, it would get stuck. I thought that was funny. And then this guy also says what Tim was saying earlier. There's a click, the song fades back in, and it's not uncommon for 8 tracks to separate on a time lapse. So basically what they're saying is fade in, fade out, and go back. So somehow you would go back songs when you didn't mean to. You would go forward, they'd fade in, they'd fade out, there would be a click, and you never quite knew what you were going to get anytime you put it in the player.
Yeah, I think objectively 8-tracks are a terrible music format. I mean, they were around the same time as regular audio cassettes. And it's funny that the Learjet people got into cahoots with auto manufacturers to make 8-tracks a thing when the Philips compact cassette, as it was known at the time, was available. Well, and think about this. When you're in your car, do you want this thing that's it's the size of my hand? They're huge and they're bulky. How are you storing those in your vehicle? It's literally like the worst possible
option. It's funny to me that they teamed up with automotive, like, to make it that popular thing in the car, but made it the least accessible thing for in your car.
I mean, that's true. I've seen them. They are quite bulky. But one thing I would say about US culture in general, we like big things.
It's true.
Big cars, big houses, big. And I don't know whether it just plays into that whole cultural thing where it's a physically large item, so therefore it must be good.
Possibly. It's also probably the ability to advertise it with the vehicle and just kind of put it in the forefront of tech. At that time, we probably thought it was the forefront of technology. We got our new nice Ford whatever vehicle, and it came with the new 8-track. We didn't know what it was. It's kind of like when you think about when cell phones came out and they were the size of a shoe or bigger. Did you ever have a bag phone, Tim, like in your car?
A what kind of phone?
Like the bag phone. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like the cell phones that were in the bags?
No, I had a Motorola flip phone and a car kit in my Skoda where you'd clip it in and there was a speaker and a microphone. I had that. But
so
no, I didn't
my
have
mom
a bag
had
phone.
one. Tim's like, what in the world? My mom had one. I remember when I was younger, or it was dad. One of them had it in their vehicle. It's set in a bag, like the phone did. And you picked it up and it had a cord almost like your phone at home. And it was called a bag phone.
I mean, you see them in films sometimes. When I watch Knight Rider, sometimes like the cops might have a phone with a curly cord in their car. I've seen that.
I mean, that's fair. So the next thing I'm going to ask Tim is, have you had this thought? So we're talking about big, bulky things, driving in cars. And, the big thing now is don't text while you drive. Don't do this while you drive. And I'm sitting here imagining somebody listening to Tom Tom's car while driving down the interstate trying to get their 8-track CD tape out while driving through major rush hour traffic. And we always joke about how, we've gotten so much worse at being distracted, but that seems like a really big distraction to me while you're driving.
Exactly. Wiggling this big plastic thing in the middle of your dashboard, trying to get trying to get the Bay City rollers to work or something. I don't know.
So in my generation, we had something very similar. And I look back now and I wonder how I'm alive, actually. Sorry, Mom and Dad. I think about this. So we had giant CD cases in our cars, but the big, bulky CD cases. And I would be driving down the road, going through the CD cases, trying to find which CD, putting like one in my mouth, one hand on the steering wheel, and the other one putting the CD in.
Yeah, the case logic cases, to be precise.
And I also had one that like went up on your, what is it? On your, what are those things? Visor. Yes.
Visor.
For those who don't know what I'm doing, Tim can physically see me trying to find the visor in the car. I had one that would go up there, but occasionally if I took a turn too fast, all the CDs would go flying out across the car and like hit me in the face or anything like that. So I'm just saying, they talk about texting now, but it's not like we didn't have certain things like that, Tim.
Exactly. I'm very disappointed. My car does not have a CD player anymore. My previous car did, but my current one doesn't, unfortunately.
Mine does. Yay!
Well, I'm going to get you for Christmas. I'm going to get you a Case Logic, and I'm going to burn like 25 CDs for you.
I love that. I still... I was a big CD burner back in the day. I totally did it all legally, Tim. I've never heard of any of those sharing websites.
Well, let me tell you, recently I found a spindle of CDs that I hadn't used, and I have actually been burning some CDs to listen to downstairs. And I don't know, there's something about it. It's like you make it and then you burn it and then you play it. I don't know. I've been enjoying that experience.
Well, and I since we're on the topic of physical media, I have to bring up Tim's favorite, which is the CD. I would always label mine very pretty on the front, too. I had my marker situation, and I thought I was very creative with the fonts I would use and the little pictures. And did you said, though, no one has ever burned you a CD? Is that what you said, Tim?
I said no one has ever made me a mixtape. And by mixtape, I mean cassette or CD. But no one ever made me one.
Well, now everyone who listens for Christmas, we're all going to make Tim a mixtape and send it to him via P.O. Box so you can't find his house. Well, Tim would be like, and that would be kind of cool though if we could find a way to make that happen. If we got a PO box and had listeners send in stuff, but then it would be interesting to see what we got if anyone sent anything. I might be terrified too. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. It'd be very interesting. I said we had a listener one time email me and ask me for an autograph picture, which I did send an autograph picture and I mailed it out to them.
And I was sad that he didn't ask me for anything, but fine.
There we are. But yeah, if anyone wants to send us stuff, we will email us and we'll make it happen.
You just include me this time in whatever you're doing, even if it's creepy. I just want to be included. All right, Tim. So happy 8-track day, the worst medium ever to be put in a car. And hopefully one day you'll find them in a thrift shop. Do you have anything you want to leave the people with?
Be extra kind to everyone you meet.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. See you later. Bye-bye.